welcome to the Career Corner. My name is Heather Swift. Today we have a guest named Diana Lee. She's a human resources executive, currently the Chief Human Resources Officer for a global Japanese banking firm. Trading firm, right?
Trading firm, yes.
She's also a proud Maplewood resident and the mother of 2 boys, the second of which will be graduating this June, coming
next
up.
month.
Oh my goodness, big changes.
Yeah.
Diana's going to be sharing a lot of her human resource experience from how to jumpstart your career for young people that might be doing that for the very first time, as well as what is it like to be a human resources professional, now CHRO, and as a female in the workplace, and what changes has she seen with women being actually more in the workplace than ever before. So Diana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. It's great to be here.
So I'm always so curious when people have been successful in a career, what made you first interested in HR? And was this a big plan when you graduated that you knew about this? Or how did you come to know of the human resources?
No, not at all. It was a happy accident. I studied art history and art as an undergraduate. And when I came out of school, I had the grand plan to become an architect.
Oh, wow.
So I was in school in Ohio, and I came back to New York City to study architecture. And I studied for a year, and I was about to go to graduate school to get my master's in architecture, but I had my last-minute doubts and got cold feet. And I just decided to defer it and to take a job. And by coincidence, the job that I took required that the project be expanded very quickly. So their idea was that they would take all of us, and we were all what we would, paralegals or document analysts, and train us how to interview so that we could go out and interview people to bring onto the project. And it was that experience that sort of gave me the epiphany that this was something that I could do for a living because I was comfortable doing it. I think I was good at it. And that was my first experience in human resources. That led me to go on to my next job. I never did go to architecture school, obviously. And then I started working in a bank back in the early 80s, which is now part of J.P. Morgan Chase, and I ran the employment department. So that was my start.
Oh, wow. That is a very happy accident.
Yes. It was a very fortunate decision. It was not by plan or design, so I am lucky. Because when I entered the field that many years ago, it was not a mainstream part of running a business, which it is today. I'm very glad that, and I'm very gratified by the career that I've had, because over the years it has become a very strategic function in running a large organization and a business.
Yeah, and I've even seen that just from my partnering with HR over the years as well, that it's much more of a partnership and it's more value add because it's not a revenue generator.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that some organizations are still struggling, but most of the majority, especially in the banking financial world, they really see that they're, one of their best assets is the people, and we need good people to help maintain, grow, retain, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that that's very accepted wisdom these days in business and in corporations.
So I would love to kind of jumpstart into people are graduating, people are interviewing for summer jobs, things of that nature. How has that changed over the years? And what are some do's and don'ts maybe you could share with people that might really be interviewing for the first time and really maybe their social skills are like this, So how can we get that head pulled up and to really communicate in a way that you would want to hire somebody?
Well, I think that yes, so much has changed, but at the same time, nothing has changed. There are still some very good common sense tips for people who are interviewing for the first time. And they're really such simple ones, but believe it or not, they do get overlooked. So the first one that I would say that's just common sense is when you have an interview, be early or on time. Okay, because there's nothing that can make a worse first impression than being late, or to feel yourself rushed and then not feeling confident or comfortable during your meeting. The second one that's very basic is be nice to everyone you meet.
Oh,
so,
yes.
I mean, it's usually obvious to the person that you should be nice to the person who's interviewing you, but I would extend that to literally everyone, starting from the moment that you walk into that lobby, into the reception area, speaking to the receptionist, and even after you leave, because they're all people who know each other, and often you'd be surprised when you step into an elevator, you may very well be standing next to the person that you're meeting or the person that you're meeting's coworker, and they will mention this, or they might mention it to the person afterward, and if you're not that nice, it'll get known.
I've met, to your point, I've met many receptionists who I think knew more about what was going on in the organization than the CEO. and they
Yes.
knew they truly knew everybody because
Yes.
they're greeting everyone with smiles and welcoming them. So that is a great point because
Yes.
people think, oh yeah, receptionist, she's just calling Diana to come see me,
Yeah.
as opposed to them being also a key part of the team, and maybe HR is saying, you know, what were they like out here?
Absolutely.
You never know.
That absolutely happens. The other thing that is a very practical thing to do is bring an extra copy of your resume because the interviewer probably will have a copy, but maybe not. And there's nothing that's more sort of disruptive at the beginning of a meeting when the interviewer feels unprepared and doesn't have a copy. So it's always nice to be able to save the day and say, I have an extra copy right here.
Do you think that your recruiters for your current firm right now are also checking people out on LinkedIn? Are they using social media first prior to meeting people?
Well, I think at my current firm, we do to a small extent, and I think that this might be generally true for recruiters in any firm. You know, something that people on the outside may not realize about recruiters and human resources people is that when we interview, especially this day and age with electronic job boards and social media, you can literally get hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants and resumes for a
Yeah.
single job.
Yeah.
So I would say that if we're researching people using social media, we're more likely to do it after we've met the person, and if we are seriously considering the candidate.
Okay.
There's more time to do it at that point.
No, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Because unless they just have all the time in the world on their hands
Yes.
to check out everyone's LinkedIn
Yes.
profile. Have you had any experiences when you were, you know, early interviewing where someone maybe didn't have as much experience, but it was their personality and the soft skills they brought to the table that really won them that job?
Very much so. You know, now, I may not be that representative. I've been recruiting for many, many years, and I think I am a little bit unconventional in that I really don't necessarily rely a lot on people's previous experience, you know, as a factor in hiring them. I mean, I really believe that, you know, a bright person, a capable person can learn a lot on the job. And something that I find a little off-putting myself is that when I look at a job description, there's so many requirements these days that, you know, that I think are not really necessarily that predictive of how well the person will be on the job. So I really do like to get to know the person a little bit and to hear more about the person's background and really make a determination as to fit. Because beyond the experience that the person brings into the job, you know, how will the person fit into the company, into the culture? How will he or she get along with the coworkers? Those are as important, I think, as necessarily someone's specific background.
And thank you for that. And what would you say to young people that are, you know, maybe in their first job only, or maybe just starting their second job, or they've had internships, and they really don't have a lot of experience? What are some things you would recommend that they actually speak to differentiate themselves?
Well, I think that there are quite a few things. You know, first of all, read up on what the job requires beforehand and really try to think through your background, even if it's not been in a previous job per se, to think about what related skills or experiences or even traits that you have that you think would be applicable for the job itself. So there's a lot that you can draw on. I mean, you can draw on certainly your school activities, you can draw on your, you know, your summer jobs, and I think that that's perfectly acceptable, especially for someone early on in his or her career when you don't necessarily have a lot of job experience. I mean, what recruiters are looking for, especially for more entry-level jobs, is again, they're looking for someone who is going to fit into the culture, who they think is going to work hard and is really going to be versatile in applying whatever background and skills they have to the job that's at hand.
I was recently today reading an article that was posted on LinkedIn about how much are kids learning in school, where parents are spending, you know this, a lot of money for a good education, but what are kids actually really learning and taking away? And they used to do a test, the beginning, middle, and end, about deductive reasoning, how well they're obtaining knowledge once reading it, and just strategic thinking. And there was not a large uptick at the end of 4 years.
Right.
And so much so that universities typically don't do that, and they never share their results because a lot of the kids think, woohoo, here's from college. So it's interesting because you want to think we're training young people for particular skills, but unless you're going into something specific, you're looking for someone that's more of a go-getter and someone that can learn.
Yes, that's
so,
true.
I would think that being involved in some things, you need a story to tell, right?
That's
you can't just sit there and just say, well, I did the best cake stands. Like there needs to be something concrete athlete in that way.
That's right.
Are you trying to coach your young gentlemen that are scholars in
Yes.
that, as far as just having enthusiasm with pick a few things and?
Yeah, very, very much so. But at the same time, Heather, and I can relate back to this when I was starting out in my career as well, so much of the time we read about follow your passion, really sort of know what you like and just do, and just pursue that. And I think my dilemma, my own personal dilemma, and I have a feeling this applies to others as well, is that sometimes early on in your career, you don't really know what your passion is. You don't have enough experience yet to be able to pinpoint, this is what I want to do. I mean, take example, for example, myself. I studied art and art history, and I really didn't know how that was going to apply to a world other than, maybe being a professor or translating it into architecture. So what I did was, I was lucky. I sort of fell into something that I ended up liking and I'm good at. But I would say for young people, if you're not passionate about something, that's okay. Go out there, try a few different things. You will learn through trial and error what it is you're good at.
No, that's good advice. And when I've talked to some young people, I've always said, talk to people that are in the jobs you think you may want.
Yes.
Because I hear of people spending all this time trying to become something, and they never spoke to someone that is that.
Yes.
And sometimes all that glitters isn't gold,
No, I agree with you. I think that's a very practical thing to do, and I ended up doing that when I was considering going to architecture school. I interned for an architect for a year, and really through that experience, I found that I still loved the field and I loved design, but I could see that the actual life of an architect was not all that attractive and not that suitable for me.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, so you kind of came true with what your own experience would lead you to.
Yes.
Which is nice. Well, lucky for all the people you've worked with, and that you're not just designing big homes and all those good things. We'll be taking a break in a moment, and when we come back, I would love to tap into some of the trends you've seen change in the workplace, and about what do you think is going on with more women being in the workplace and young women getting into the workplace beyond men. Are there more of us now, or I wonder what?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, great.
Sure. Look forward to that.
Super. We'll be back in a brief moment with Diana Lee, Senior Human Resources Officer. Thank you.
Local government, local educational institutions, and local community members all use cable access TV to communicate their message. They depend upon it as an affordable means of outreach. Public educational and government access television empowers local government agencies, individuals, and groups to use the media to speak directly to their constituents in a more direct and cost-effective way. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Hi, welcome back to the Career Corner. I'm with my guest, Diana Lee, who's a Chief Human Resource Officer for a global Japanese trading firm. We're talking about the changes in the workplace now. So Diana, a question for you, and I do get asked this, and so I'd love your opinion.
Right.
So this thing called the cover letter.
Right.
Is it extinct? Is it still helpful? Can it make a difference? What do you think?
It's funny that you asked that, Heather, because I can think of a very specific experience I had about 3 years ago. In that situation, I happened to be recruiting for a head of HR for a small startup. And so I put the ad in a few places, and I was inundated with resumes. I would say that I got well over 100. And so I think it's helpful for people who are applying for jobs to think of it from the person who's reading the resume's perspective. And so it's very, as you can imagine, it can be a pretty tedious task. But I remembered going through all the resumes, and there was a letter that's sort of in the middle of the pile that really stuck out, that where he was writing to a real person. You could tell that he had written the letter so that he was thinking of a real person when he was writing it, and that came through to me. And I remembered thinking, wow, this person is really interesting. In fact, I think the leading line in the letter was, I can just imagine what you're doing now. You're probably reading through stacks of letters and resumes, and you're probably wondering, why should I consider this person? And it was written in such an authentic way that it really struck me, and I did end up inviting him in for an interview, and he ended up being one of the final candidates. So that's just a story that I think might be helpful to hear, because I am a believer in cover letters and using it as a way to really distinguish yourself from the others.
It's almost because it's hard to have your voice in just a resume. But in a cover letter, you can use more of perhaps your writing style to kind of come through in a warm fashion.
Very much so, very much so. You really can get a feel for the person's personality, and you can find out other practical things too. You can tell how much they've learned, they've read about the company or in your opening, and how much preparation they've done, and how much thought they've put into this job and what they're writing.
How many seconds do you spend eyeballing your resume before you put it on the go pile? I've heard around 6 seconds. Is that
if that many actually to be
really?
just to be
well, when you have
honest.
100, so what are you? Where are your eyes drawn to, and what's the quick elimination process for you?
Well, you're really scanning. You're literally spending, if 6 seconds actually at the resume. You're looking first of all at the name. You're looking at the last place the person worked, how many years he or she may have been there. And I tend to look down at the bottom. And I like to see education. And now that's me, and that's not necessarily true for all people. I tend to look down at the very bottom for education, even for experience level jobs, because I just think it's interesting to take a look at the person's complete background, just not the names of the companies, the titles of the jobs, but also where the person trained.
Interesting. Yeah, I knew it was a quick glance through. But yeah, when you have a whole pile, what else are you going to do? You can't spend minutes, combing over everything.
Yes. So, yeah, I know it's merciless, isn't it? And unfortunately, it's what happens in this day and age, because there is now, the advent of digital.
Yes.
Literally, what will happen is that you could easily get hundreds of resumes, and so you are obligated to go through them, but it does become tedious, and so you do go through them very quickly.
So to that point, how important would it be then to truly network and have someone that can refer you to a hiring manager and kind of get out of the black hole or that big pile, but to have someone say, hey, I know Diana, she's fabulous, she could really be an asset to our organization, will you please take a peek?
Yeah, it's helpful. Yeah, if you can do that, that would be helpful. Although I would say that it's not foolproof, because that does happen, quite often, where someone will personally send you a resume of a friend or a brother-in-law.
Yes.
And sometimes it's helpful, and I would say actually as many times as not, it's not. So it's worth trying. I think it's always worth trying to make that extra effort, but it's not 100%.
Yeah, so-and-so's grandson isn't as adorable as she thinks he is.
Yes.
You never know.
Right.
But it's nice to get the courtesy, I guess.
Yes.
And if they are a rock star, at least they can really elevate maybe
Yes.
quicker than just
Yes.
the pile in that way. So we were mentioning earlier that there's a lot more young women coming out of college and entering the workforce than
Yes.
ever before. What have you seen change as an HR professional when it comes to both women and men in the workplace, and that more of an equal playing field or not?
Yeah, well, it certainly has changed quite a bit, but I've been in the workplace for about 30 or more years now, so it was a very different world when I first started, and especially since I started in a more traditional corporate environment. My first job was in a bank, and then after that at a big financial
Did you have to wear
services
skirts,
company.
no pantsuits?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, believe it or not, it wasn't until maybe the first 10 years after I started working that it was acceptable to wear pants. I remember it was a big deal when the rule...
Even in wintertime, 30-degree weather, 25-degree weather.
Even in wintertime, women were expected to wear, pantyhose and skirts and a suit and
high heels.
And high heels, except that what happened was that we discovered that it was more convenient and comfortable to wear flats to work, and then you kept all of your heels at work.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, so certainly there's been that difference too, that there isn't that strict code of dress as much for both men and women now. But I would say that the biggest difference is that absolutely women are much more obviously mainstream in business in terms of being given responsibility and being given opportunity. So that's a world of difference, although, I do think that honestly, Heather, you and I wouldn't be sitting here and even talking about it if there were true parity in the workplace. I mean, I do think that there's still a long way to go, and that even though there's been tremendous progress over the last couple of decades, women are still, in many ways, still at a disadvantage in ascending all the way to the top.
Yeah.
I think what the statistics show is that, there's a lot of, equity, through probably the early part of one's career. In fact, I think some studies have shown that women are actually ahead of men in a lot of cases, especially, the college grads. But really, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, women do lose that advantage once they get into the middle and definitely towards the senior part of their career, where if you take a look at the most senior positions across industry at this point, the overwhelming majority are still occupied by men.
And I wonder if, too, if it's that, we have to have the babies if we want to have the babies.
Right.
And I have some women that have opted for both. They were high-level power players,
Right.
opted out, some went back.
Right.
But the ones that took time out, they really lost their ranking.
Yes.
And they didn't keep their pulse in there maybe as much as they should have.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate. And it's still because you still want to be there and make, the family
Right.
unit. But when
Yeah.
it takes two breadwinners to pay New Jersey taxes and
Yeah,
to have
that's
a
right.
life and not shop, at Bergdorf Goodman or something, just
Right.
to have a normal, sweet, existence. It
Yes.
takes a lot
Yes.
of dinero these days.
Yeah, I think that my personal belief, and I've always worked in corporations, so, I'm part of that culture, but I really do think that corporations have done not nearly enough to try to make the workplace a flexible enough one so that not just for women but for men to be
Yeah.
able to
Coach.
Yes.
Go to Little League, enjoy being a dad
Exactly,
also.
Exactly.
Totally.
I mean, there's a price to be paid, whether you're a man or a woman, if
Yeah.
you're trying to lead, a productive and rich life outside of work and still work in a very demanding work environment. So I think that there's a lot that companies still need to do in order to try to strike that balance more. But it's hard. It
Yeah.
really will go into the whole grain of the way we do business. Everything would have to change. And I think we're slowly making those changes, but probably not fast enough as far as I'm concerned. But I do think, and this is my sort of my theory and my vision for the future, that things are going to change and the nature of work, the world of work, the world of corporations and organizations will slowly change over time, mostly because of the advent of being able to work virtually.
Yeah.
I did think that, we're not going to know organizations as we know them today probably in a couple of decades from now. I think that people will be much more independent. There'll be loose coalitions of employees sort of doing work, especially now with changes in healthcare legislation. They're portable, so there's no longer that, overwhelming need to work for a corporation so that you know that you'll be getting medical benefits. So I think that a lot will change over time.
It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yes,
And especially with the younger generations coming in with these skill sets that of the technology base and things that they're already assuming. I always find it very funny though when people are like, oh yeah, I don't want to have to do this. Do I get my promotion? You know, and are you finding that with some of the 20-somethings that they still don't want to have to quote unquote pay their dues, but just rise right up to the top quicker?
Yeah, I think that there is, it's true. I think that the expectations are that they would progress more quickly than maybe previous generations. But you know what, I think at the same time, I think that millennials actually get a little bit of a bad rap about that. I mean, if one can generalize, and it's hard to generalize about such a broad sweep of people, I think that, they're certainly very talented and hardworking people, but it's true, their expectations are different. Not only do they expect, sort of like maybe quicker progression, they also expect a lot more immediate feedback. And that's a big change that large companies are having to make. Like, so for example, it's famous that at Google, you literally get a performance appraisal 4 times a year.
Oh,
and
wow.
they take it seriously. It's none of this, like once a year would be just far too little to be getting feedback. They actually get feedback 4 times a year, and it's a pretty formal, serious process.
I know the time it takes for the managers, to do that for their people. So I imagine they really have to build that into their schedule for 4 times. That's intense.
Yeah, that's right.
But I guess it helps people stay on track, in that way of, are you staying on track in the plan and accomplishing your goals, or are we kind of off tangent here a little bit?
Yeah, very much so. There's that, and there's also the fact that that people are demanding it. They want to know how they're doing. And they want to know what the expectations are. So, that's the adaptation that managers and companies are having to make.
That's nice. I could see where that could work, and it will definitely teach the boomers to have to communicate more and in that light, you know, to have those conversations in that way.
Yeah.
So we have about a minute or so left.
Okay.
So is there any other tips you'd like to share as we come to a close today for that interview process, or following up after the interview? What's the appropriate way to do that, maybe?
Yes, I know. I think follow-up is absolutely important. I think it's absolutely a requirement that after you meet with someone that you send a follow-up note. And I know that some people debate whether it should be a handwritten note or email, but I think that both are perfectly fine. An email is perfectly fine. Just make sure that it's grammatical, there are no spelling mistakes, and that if you can, use it as an opportunity to elaborate on something that you think you can offer that's pertinent for the job. That's very important.
And if you meet with 5 people, you send 5 people a note, correct?
That's exactly right. And if you can, you vary it a little bit, because believe it or not, they do talk to each other and compare notes.
I have seen that, and I have done that before too. Like, oh, I have a thank you note also. What does it look like?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's great. No, and I think people forget that, and young people are like, oh, I can just send a text, but it is nice to put thought into that, because again, you're representing your brand.
Very much so. It makes a difference. And also beyond the first follow-up note, if you don't hear, it's always nice that people show persistence. If there is a pending decision, it's not impolite to follow up maybe 2 weeks later and to inquire politely.
Okay. Yeah, because no one wants to be a stalker.
Yes, exactly.
So respectfully to keep saying, oh, just thinking of you and wanting to check in.
That's right.
That's
right.
great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Career Corner today.
You're very
welcome. I feel like I could keep you for over an hour easily sharing everything with you, so I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, anytime. And thank you all for tuning in to watch Diane Lee and myself on the Career Corner. Please check us out on YouTube. Under the Career Corner, we have lots of other great shows and guests for you to check out for your career success. Until we meet again, have a great day.